thank you first to everyone turning up today, whatever time of day or night you are and wherever you're coming from. It's a pleasure to be here with you. Thank you also to the fabulous team at DQ for putting on such a great event and inviting us to it. And thank you also, Kira, for making sure that this is completely inclusive, including our friends who are sign language users. So let's get going. Tom, if you want to go to the next slide. Thank you. Open inclusion. So we are an organisation that really helps bring the voice of diverse consumers or employees to design and innovation. So helping people understand how does experience vary and unlocking value as a result of that understanding. And in terms of that, really understanding how the diversity of people, whether it's their needs, their approaches, their preferences, or their abilities, and the combination of these can really influence the experience and how that influences business value. Next slide. So to introduce ourselves, hi, I'm Christine. Yes, I'm the Managing Director of Open Inclusion, and it's been a real pleasure to have set this journey off with Open and helping bring more diverse insight into the design and innovation, whether it's in digital or across the board in broader experience. Tom, our Research Director, over to you.
Hi, everyone. Really lovely to meet you all. It was quite an impressive list of people, and even my hometown of Ottawa is being represented, so big shout out to you guys and everyone in Canada as well. So I'm Open Inclusion's Research Director, and essentially I'm an inclusive researcher, inclusive designer, and yeah, very committed to helping ensure that the insights from users that know best are represented in design at every stage of the design process. And that's what we'll talk about today.
Thank you. So covering today, we'll cover fairly quickly 5 areas. Firstly, inclusive insight and design. Secondly, learning and unlearning the importance of both. Looking to a better process, a more beautiful question, and a journey, not a destination. So if you click through, Tom, this actually has a build. The what it is and who it includes is really that inclusive insight. What is inclusion? Who do we include for it? Going from truth to judgment in terms of learning and unlearning, and really looking at that flick as we go from looking for knowledge experts to perspective experts. The impact aligned choices and actions helping support that, and learning what to and how to ask and listen, which is incredibly important. And lastly, that constant progression towards ongoing value. So what does inclusive design mean to you? And just take a moment to just think, what does that term mean to you? What do you think about when you think about inclusive design? You're welcome to write it down on a note or put it in the chat as to what that means to you. Is it the same or different to accessibility? What about universal design or adaptive design? What's the difference in your mind between these things? Is there any difference? So this is sorry, we won't give you much time on that one, but this is our thought on it, which is essentially inclusive design is consciously creating environments that allow a very wide variety of people to do something. So there's a conscious element to it. There's environments that could be digital, physical, customer service, communications, the full spectrum of environments that you might be involved in creating. And it's this very wide variety of people. To us, it's whether they identify as disabled or not, whether they use particular assistive technologies or not. It's just that as wide as possible that you make something available and equitable and fair. If you flip it on its head, exclusion is quite easy to understand because we all know the sensation and feeling of exclusion. And in this, it's the dots outside of the circle. So for those just to audio describe it, we have a blue circle here with some yellow dots within a circle and some yellow dots that are sitting outside of it, and it's a closed circle, and exclusion is being outside of the experience within. So sorry, I've got to flip to the next one. So there's 2 ways that you can get people in the circle. The first one is really what we think of as universal design, which is just designing more broadly so that everyone can experience it as it is designed, as a kind of one size fits more. And that's using the tools of universal design. The other one is adaptive design, which is creating options, if you click through, Tom, options for the different people with different access needs to have a really positive experience, but a slightly alternate journey that you can create for them. An inclusive experience, which is what we talk about and think about, is the combination of those two. It's just ensuring that there is a high quality experience available to everyone, whether it's done through a universal approach or an adaptive approach. So who does it include? To us, it's really the starting point is there is no normal. It is an absolute myth that there is a normal consumer. And in fact, I've seen, even this week, Unilever's put out some communication to say they're stopping using the term normal in some of their brand and marketing and even internal communications. Because the truth is we all sense, think, feel and communicate differently, 100% of us. Disability is the point at which that difference is exclusive, creates a barrier of exclusion where design has failed to support that difference. That difference might be in mobility or dexterity, the way we think and feel with neurodiversity, the way we sense with either hearing or sight, or age-related degenerative change as we get older. It can be a combination of these things. It can be permanently one of these things. It could be temporary or just situational. But essentially, we're all wonderfully and fabulously diverse. And however many people are on this call today, the one thing that is consistent across all of us is our difference. There won't be two people the same and that sense and experience a particular environment in the same way. So the two spaces, just to touch on, because this conference particularly looks at accessibility, is the difference between accessible design and inclusive design. And this is very much the way we think of it, and I'm sure it can be debated by many. And if we were in a conference, we could have a glass of wine or a coffee to have that debate. I would love to. But essentially, we can talk about it in Q&A. Accessibility to us is very much ensuring it is accessible, ensuring that it fits the guidelines, whether they're WCAG guidelines or in the built environment, things like the Code Part M in the UK. And obviously, the Equalities Act or the ADA is responsible for setting the requirements in the UK and USA, the two that we probably know best. The priority here is really access, and it's about reducing risk and ensuring that the guidelines are met. So where that crystallised knowledge exists, ensuring that you fulfil the needs of that. Using an analogy of the road, it's a bit like making sure you don't break the rules of the road, and they're important and they're there as for good reason, because they're going to protect people from damaging themselves or damaging others. Inclusion, however, is insight-based. It is about maximising the value of an experience and ensuring that experience is as consistently delightful to as many people as possible. So in the road analogy, some people might be driving on that road, some might wish to walk, some might wish to take a bus or a bike. Irrespective of how people wish to move around using the same space, that they get an experience that has been designed for them with their needs and preferences in mind. So it's very much about maximising value and the upside of this, as opposed to just minimising the risks, minimising the costs and risks. So we really bring in this, the image here is a human-centered design triangle, which is well used across the HCD or human-centered design community, which at the base of it is that a product is functional. And as you're moving up the triangle, it becomes reliable, usable, and then delightful. Functionality is really that it just does what it's meant to do and that you complete the task it was designed for. Reliability is that it does that across a very wide range of conditions and very consistently within the context of the user. The usability is that it's intuitive, that it's easy to use. So it's not that it just works, but it works in a way that makes sense and is coherent for each user. And delightful, which is where most people get up in the morning not to just do something that is functional, but to do something that will delight people. And particularly as designers and innovators, this is the point that we'd like to get to, is to make things more delightful. And delight might mean, if you're in banking, which is something that's really quite functional, doing something that allows people to get on with the rest of their day quickly. That's still delightful. Not being a disturbance in their day creates delight. Whereas in other spaces, such as, tourism, when we get back to it, delight has obviously got, many, many more layers that can come in. Which brings us to two basic principles of inclusive design. These are pretty easy to remember. The first one is do no evil. Don't exclude people. Don't unwittingly or wittingly exclude people. And make sure that the core accessibility principles and practices are all fulfilled and met. Use the guidelines and tools. Use experiences like this one to constantly learn and improve and progress in the knowledge both that you have and your teams and your organisation have. Audit your products. Use the tools to make that as easy and efficient as possible. You're here in the home of DQ today, so that shift left, making it really efficient to do this really well, to do no evil. The other side of this is be efficiently and consistently delightful. So design with human difference in mind. Really understand the impacts of customers and their experiences. Bring that knowledge in through the principles of inclusive design, and use the human-centered approach, just ensuring that you have a diverse set of humans, not a really limited set of humans that you're designing around. So as designers, we often work with some really fabulous teams in our client organizations. They've got all the skills, they've got great capability, they're very creative, they're very able to use that in a wide range of environments. But what they are missing in many circumstances is this inclusive insight, which is the fuel to let it go, let their energy really go forward in a positive and fast way. I love this quote from, this is actually a lyric from a song, which is, with all the drive in the world, you still need gas. And inclusive insight is that gas that can fuel the design engine. So to learning and unlearning, I love this Mark Twain quote. You'll see I quite like quotes. It ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And there are so many of these layers in digital experiences, because digital is always moving. People are always moving. Their expectations, the way they engage with digital are always changing. Just looking at this last year with COVID and the way in which digital has changed the way we interact by requirement and by practice is a really good example of this. So we've got to constantly keep learning, because we need to actually constantly keep unlearning. So from the superheroes to super perspectives, in the old days, you kind of say, well, let's get someone who's a superhero who can come in and save our organisation. And sorry to say, I forgot my cape today. I didn't forget my T-shirt, by the way, DQ T-shirt here. But we're not superheroes. We don't have superhero capability. What we bring is super perspectives. In fact, we don't. We just provide the funnel to those super perspectives. It's the customers or employees that themselves have those super perspectives. And you can see here the different perspectives. If you had one point in the middle that you're trying to understand, if you have people that are very different looking out in different directions, you'll get these very wide perspectives on that environment and that experience you're trying to create. And this really helps us, because as a designer or as someone creating an experience, if we come from a point of my truth, I have this truth that I know and I'm trying to create for, then it's mine versus yours. If we come from a perspective view, there's a lot of contextualized moments of truth. And Tom can give you some experience of this as he talks about some of our actual research later. But we can have 6 people in a usability session that have 4 particularly different views on exactly the same thing. And that's, each one of those is true, but true from the context and relevance of that person. So it's this constantly scanning the 360 degree to get those truths and fill the gaps. And it's going from a knowledge base to a learning base, and really starting, rather than being anchored in our own experience, being able to anchor in a range of people's experiences. And that includes challenging ourselves. Even as researchers, we have to design our research with a range of experiences. And we actually, again, Tom can talk to this later, but we co-design our research with community leaders that represent the full spectrum of communities of different access needs that we're designing research for. So rather than being the people that have all the answers, the lovely thing about this is it frees us up to be the people that have the questions. And that's such a fun place to be, because you're constantly learning actually how to learn and building new knowledge that can take an organisation far further forward, far faster than trying to answer everything yourself. So curiosity is the key here. Learning how to ask, how to observe, learn, and rebalance all the time based on that knowledge. And I really like this. I've been listening to Mark Randolph lately. He's just put out one of his books. He's the Netflix founder, and he really talked about probably the summary of his concept is, so then we had this insight. It was that it was not about having good ideas. It was about building the system and the process, the culture for testing lots of bad ideas and using the process to make them better. And that's how inclusive insight can help that process fuel it with that sharpening of an idea that might have started out as a how might we, how could we fix a problem that we're seeing, and really turning it into a powerful solution. So bringing in diverse insight, that's great. Who do we bring in, and what level of diversity is relevant, and why would that, do we need to do this in conjunction with other insight? The starting point is actually inclusive research and insight really has more value per person. It's kind of the rocket fuel of the fuel, if we keep back to our fuel analogy, because people are way more than their disability. So they may have a permanent, access need, whether it's they've got sight loss and they're blind, whether they consider themselves neurodiverse, or actually whether they're just getting older and might not identify as disabled but have a range of needs. But they also have other characteristics that take them through the centre of that normal curve. So you cover off the centre, but you also stretch your insight and the value and the perspectives you're getting right out to the edges. So if you've got only 6 people that can give you insight on a particular project or something you're looking at, if you get 6 people that have very specific access needs, the power of that insight will be so much more strong and effective. So the comment I've put here is, you don't stress test your system on average daily volumes. So don't user test your system on standard users. So this goes back to these different perspectives. If you have a budget, and I can imagine some of you are there going, that's great, but I don't have a budget for additional insight, and insight's quite costly. We use this acronym SWIM to success, and SWIM stands for someone who isn't me. So if you've got a team of people and they've got a particular perspective, if you could only bring one person in who is as different to that group of people or yourself as an individual as you can possibly imagine, in as many characteristics as possible. If you can only bring 4 people in, bring 4 people that are as different from each other as possible. So pick characteristics that are really significantly different across that group. And once you start to get, 8, 10 people, this is where, very interestingly, yes, you can get a lot more insight, and quant insight has a real power and value as well as qualitative. But actually, even at 6 or 10 people, you can start to get some really interesting 360-degree views across that community. One of the places that inclusive design and inclusive insight has particular power is the faster moving spaces of innovative technology and emerging technology. When there's more uncertainty, there's more value in getting insight in early, and there's specific value in inclusive insight, in bringing people in with disabilities who use assistive technology, who engage with things in really specifically different ways. 2 reasons for this. One, it's going to create new technologies that don't create inequity, that then take decades or ranges of rollouts after to improve. And if you think about something like the phone, it took 60 years to become more accessible to people with hearing loss. If you think about touch screens, it took 2 generations of the iPhone to have a touch screen that was inclusive to people with sight loss. When we look at XR, and I'm quite involved in XR Access, so anyone who's interested in immersive technology, please go and have a look there. We'd like this, as it picks up speed and becomes a mainstream technology, to pick up speed with the community of people with a wide range of access needs and disabilities, so that we don't create it for some people and then slowly try and catch up. Equally, it enables that innovation to be more powerful, because by putting it under that stress test of extreme needs and use cases, it's going to end up being a much more efficient way to design something that is more delightful to more people in more contexts from the very start. And we've got a Heraclitus quote here, which is actually, when we talk about speed and things changing fast, but actually everything is always changing. And this quote is, "No man steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man." And that's that constantly, rather than knowing, learning to constantly be and learning. So a better process for a consistent outcome. How do we do this in a way that is efficient across an organisation, in a way that kind of embeds inclusive insight along with other insight and your audit process and the QA and the tools you're using and everything else? So at Open, we worked on something called our Inclusive Customer Experience Canvas, where we just tried to map where different noise and opportunities to make improvements across an organisation can happen to enable better inclusive design. Not surprisingly, at the heart of this is the inclusive customer experience, the experience that the broadest range of your customers are having today with the environments that you provide them. That includes all your digital environments, physical, customer service, and communications, brand and marketing. And it includes all of your customers, including those with situational, temporary, or permanent access needs and differences in terms of their hearing, sight, mobility, dexterity, cognition, speech, communication, etc. That gives them their experience. You can then assess that experience, and through that assessment, analyse, prioritise where those big gaps are and address them in one of two ways. Either fix the environment, go, right, we need to rebuild that particular part of the environment or that particular piece, whether it's in an app or in a website or a kiosk environment, etc. Or we can actually build some more capability in the organisation so that the future environments come out more consistently inclusive. And that includes things like your leadership, your measurement and net metrics, policies, procurement, your training, tools, processes, people, and obviously the culture, the expectation around it. The human-centred design process is a fairly standard one at the bottom. The key thing is fueling that human-centred design with diverse humans. Tom, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Christine. That was great. So Christine's covered in a really thorough way the sort of the background, the theoretical aspects that underpin any approach towards inclusive research. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty, what goes on an almost daily basis at Open Inclusion, and some of the strategies that we've developed to really make this research shine and be as effective as possible. So the question that we are often asked is, okay, well, what stage of the design cycle can I do inclusive research? And the answer is at all of them, at every stage. The same rules and considerations obviously apply as in regular user research, especially design user research. For example, focus groups tend to be very good for earlier stages in the design when attitudes are being collected and so on, unless they're evaluative focus groups. Inclusive usability testing can be done throughout most phases. So we have, for example, tested paper prototypes with blind users, adopting a Wizard of Oz technique, where we pretend to be the screen reader. My own skills of becoming a screen reader are getting better as the years go by. But it's just a great way, even with very limited or early stage assets, to get that crucial insight from edge case or lead users. And then, of course, it's at those stages, it's so easy to change the design. It costs almost nothing. And very quickly you can iterate and get another version of the designs in front of users. So there's a lot of options that you can do, but essentially I would like you to take away this thought that inclusive research is possible at every stage of the design process. So then another question that we're often asked is, okay, well, who do I ask? Who do I bring into this research? What we would say to that is, the swim to success technique is absolutely what you should be following. If you have a chance to bring in more than one or two users, think about really as diverse a group and a sample as possible. So some people might be tempted to bring in screen reader users, right? Because so much of web content accessibility guidelines and accessibility is thought of from a VI, a vision impairment perspective. But in our case, for example, we have a UK-wide panel of over 500 people that represent a really wide range of ages, ethnicities, socioeconomic conditions. Often we're asked actually by certain clients we work with to get customers or non-customers. So there's so many markers of diversity, in addition to access needs, obviously. So here are this slide just kind of illustrates some suggested groups that you can bring in. Consider also, and maybe especially in some ways, the neurodiverse community, because this community is often overlooked. It's fantastically diverse. There's so many different aspects of neurodiversity. And they have some really powerful insights from their lived experience to bring to the table. And these needs are not yet really being captured in a regular way in design research. Yes, the accessibility guidelines are catching up. WCAG 3.0 is around the corner. Silver is actually out there for public consumption, basically feedback. So it's happening, but this is one area that actually is still rather underrepresented in a lot of inclusive research. The other thing I'll just mention before I move on is that empathy tools are great. So, even online tools like Funkify, they serve a purpose, no question about that, but they don't really match, the experience and the insights that can be gotten from someone who has a lifetime, in some cases a lifetime or many, many years of figuring workarounds out, based on their needs. And so putting on a pair of glasses that impair your vision momentarily give you a certain perspective, but it's not going to be the same perspective of someone who has a lifetime of experience thinking about workarounds. So now we get to an even more beautiful question, which is how do we design our inclusive insights to be itself beautifully inclusive? What does that mean? Well, inclusive research, if you just get the maximum diversity of your sample, but you still essentially use I don't want to say non-inclusive, let's just say standard research approaches that may not be thinking about the edges, then you're going to really be limiting yourself. So what we do at Open Inclusion, what's always been sort of, at the heart of our philosophy is making the research sessions inclusive. And that includes before, during, and after the actual session itself. So, for example, Christine's already mentioned that we co-create all of our research with our panel community leads. So these are our 6 community leads that represent the 6 panel communities. And those are mobility, dexterity, vision, hearing, neurodiversity, as I just spoke about, fluctuating conditions. So people who have multiple sclerosis, chronic pain conditions, other fluctuating conditions, means one day they may feel up here in terms of energy and capabilities, and the next day they may feel down there. I don't know if you can see my hands, but down there. So that actually lends itself a unique set of insights from people whose condition fluctuates. What am I missing? The older community. So we have a community panel lead for the older community, the over 65s, many of whom don't identify as disabled. They don't actually care for that marker of identity, but they are accruing access needs as they age. So very quickly here to flesh out this slide, creating an accessible and safe, confident environment, really. Back before COVID hit, we were doing a lot of in-person research, so we would obviously consider step-free access, accessible washrooms, many of which are often used by neurodiverse people as breakout rooms or quiet rooms. Carer and service dog facilities to allow service dogs to be relieved after sessions, for example, and so on. The way that you present maps and descriptions to a venue. Adaptive communication. So we always include live speech to text reporting in all of our focus groups. This is very valuable for people, not only those who have hearing impairments, but also people who may be neurodiverse, or maybe people who just missed the point that's going on in the focus group and they want to go back and say, well, what were they talking about? Oh yeah, that's right. Other adaptations include BSL interpreters, BSL because we're in England, but ASL for anyone over on the other side of the pond, etc. And adaptive engagement, this is a really important point I want to make, is the fact of the matter is inclusive research, for all of its benefits, is it often takes more time. Right? So being adaptable and allowing sufficient time, allowing multiple channels and multiple approaches. So we, for example, nowadays do everything over Zoom. Zoom is a great tool because it allows people to call in as well as participate, via, the Zoom call. So multiple approaches for engagement. Christine mentioned earlier co-design. We love to do co-design with our lead users. This engages them, it empowers them, nothing about us without us, right? That maxim. It allows us to evaluate ideas that have been created in a pan-disability environment. The photo on this slide is actually a co-design session that we ran with the UK's largest airport to ensure that the new signage for their terminals is as inclusive as possible. And this was actually a particular group which was only neurodiverse users. We had multiple groups across the day. Yeah, it's a judgment-free zone to test different ideas, and it's incredibly empowering for people. Some of the challenges around co-design is people don't necessarily think of themselves as designers, so you need to give them the space and the confidence to feel, hey, it's okay, I can actually weigh in on this. I have some views on this. I might not be a designer, but that's okay. Recognize that different people have different approaches to problem solving, right? Never take anything for granted. The solutions can often surprise and delight you. And we have some examples of this. These are cartoons that I drew actually myself for Open's blog. These are scenarios that we learned about and heard about in our usability testing and our user research throughout the years. So this particular person is someone who's on the spectrum. She has Asperger's. And during discussions with her for a project about making travel through train stations as inclusive as possible, she shared with us a mental model that she uses, which is to say that, distance doesn't mean much to her, the numbers itself. This is also the case with anyone with dyscalculia, for example, and other conditions like that. And so she actually judges distance by the number of songs on her iPod or iPhone that pass by. Like that's literally how she judges distance, or maybe how far she's progressed in the song. That was one of those moments that were just, wow. I hadn't thought about that. That was a delightful moment, and makes perfect sense. So then that gives all sorts of ideas for designers about audio cues, how to use audio in a way to help, illustrate the passage of time, for example. Just one more example. This is this was a user tester in one of our sessions. He was older. He also had dementia, so he was neurodiverse. He learned differently. And we were testing an app for a bank, and that, at one point the bank said, take a photo of your driver's license. So no joke, the gentleman pulled out a camera from his pocket and he took a photo of his driver's license. What's the problem? And then he said, now what? So he did exactly what the app instructed him to do, actually. Now, the app didn't say take a photo using your phone. He didn't think about that. So, you can't make this stuff up. And it's just, these are the gold nuggets that, inclusive research can bring forward. And then that app later clarified, that whole process around taking photos, because the designers realized, oh, not everyone quite knows what we're talking about here. So just a few slides, then I'll be done, and back over to Christine. So I mentioned we do a lot of remote research. In fact, all of our research now is remote, just because of the health and safety of obviously our panel members in the current situation. The advantage is we were doing remote research actually before COVID hit. So, this was a great way, and continues to be a great way, to engage with diverse users. A platform like Zoom happens to be quite accessible. And as I said, there's different ways you can call in. Even if you're not tech savvy, you can call in by phone and so on. The other just point to make on this is we have found it hasn't slowed us down. Actually, it's almost sped us up, really, because people can engage from the comfort of their own homes. This has an incredible effect, especially when you're dealing with people with mental health conditions. Anxiety levels are lower because they're calling from their own home. They're wearing, their pajama bottoms or whatever they're wearing, just to give them that sense of confidence. And we have found that really resulted in, excellent research feedback. So that was really good. We can also test specific products or services that relate to the home in the home. So there's so many advantages to remote research. Right, so I hope I've made a bit of a case here that no one really understands inclusion like those who are excluded. And people with lived experience are practiced lateral thinkers, problem solvers, innovators. Christine mentioned innovation. We really see inclusive design as going hand in hand with innovation. That's what fuels us to do this, and we want to include everybody in that project. Over to you, Christine.
Thank you, Tom. That just really fabulous way of just bringing it to life with some of the stories that we see every day in the research that we're doing. So how do we actually do this? So, obviously you can engage and start to engage more people more often, starting point, who are more diverse. And I love this quote. I'm an Australian, you might hear. It's from one of Australia's top performing athletes ever, Grant Hackett, who's a swimmer. And it's, any success story is the same. It's a daily grind of things that you just need to keep getting right and progressing by 0.1%, and then doing it again the next day, and then the one after. And I think that's that. This is a journey. We're all on a journey to inclusion. It doesn't have an end point. It's just something that once we step on, we're all on this journey, including us. So we don't have all the right answers. We're asking ourselves these questions all the time as well. So it's that every day just asking a little bit deeper and a little more broadly, and trying to get that one little bit more knowledge into the system so we make better design decisions. So in terms of, how do we do this in a cycle? Listening is the start and the heart of this. And that doesn't just include your diverse user base. It also includes your audits. It includes your standard user insight that's coming into the organization, your customer experience data, all the other ways that your organization has listening posts into the experience in the organization. And then kind of twining those together to make it an even stronger rope, so that you can make the prioritization decisions to improve things. Do the design, embed the capability from having done that so it's even more efficient next time, and then go back to listening again and trialing and getting that 0.1% better next time around the cycle. So the power of inclusive insight, we're coming to the end of our time here. Just to kind of sum this up, it's really reach, relevance, and resilience. So to get broader reach for your products and services so they're more delightful to more people, so that they do what they're there to be done more consistently and more effectively, so that they're relevant to the people that you're wanting, the target audience that you've got, that you're relevant to all of them within the context that they come, not the context that you might imagine that they're in, and to being relevant to them across that. And again, it's been very interesting in this COVID year. We're now 1 year on today from when the pandemic was announced by WHO. or accepted. And organisations that were already better at inclusion prior to this have been able to be much more resilient through this period and much more adaptable to very rapid change that nobody, well, I certainly couldn't have predicted. But they're a lot more resilient to that change because it was designed well to be more broadly applicable in more contexts to start with. And it does promote much more valuable innovation. So, in summary, to get something that is just more consistently good and valuable to all, go to the customers with specific access needs or your employees. This is just as relevant within the employee experience and in employee design, so that you get the benefits of inclusive design into your organisation. Engage with your edge customers more often, more broadly, in more ways that are suitable and enjoyable to them and to you, so that you can design something that is inclusive for all. That is our presentation. And now it is over to you.
Thank you so much, Christine and Tom. Fantastic presentation. I do want to apologize to our viewers for losing our captioning service. I can assure you the recorded version of this presentation will absolutely have captioning present. So I apologize for that. We do have some great questions I'd love to get to. We've got a few minutes here. I think you touched on this toward the latter half of your presentation, but there are a lot of votes for this particular presentation. Maybe you can elaborate on this. How have your testing methods changed with COVID? We have struggled with people with disability testing in a virtual environment, since we often need a coded prototype versus a flat prototype like Envision.
Yeah, I'll take that one, absolutely. Yeah, I feel the pain of the coded prototype. As I kind of had that off the cuff comment about becoming a better screen reader this year. So insofar as we test with blind people, vision impaired, and so on. Yeah, we've been doing a lot. It's true, we've been doing a lot of pretending to be the screen reader. The thing to remember there is, so you're not going to get insight about, technical accessibility, the nitty-gritty of technical accessibility, because it's not a real usability test with a functional prototype. But what you can get in these early stage prototypes are insights around things of value to screen reader users. You can also get a lot of insight around past experiences, perhaps other platforms that work well or don't work so well, etc. So you can still get that insight very effectively. In terms of, then and I know it's easier said than done, but then it's just about going to the design team and saying, right, can we iterate now for the next round to have a workable prototype? And then there's many tools you can use. Look Back is one of them. Zoom is another one of them, where you can actually test with screen readers. So we can get to that stage of usability testing. But don't be discouraged if the prototype does not work. You can still get quite a lot of valuable feedback from screen reader users by you yourself pretending to be the screen reader.
And just to add to that, Tom, absolutely right. I think just a couple of things that we've been really delighted and surprised by over this year. Yes, back to that image that, Tom's lovely art before of at every stage you can test something, but not at every stage can you test everything. So just starting with some realistic expectations of a non-functional prototype, you can't test the coded capability for a keyboard-only user or screen reader, etc. Someone using an assistive technology. However, we have really got great feedback from our assistive technology users with non-functional prototypes, because they know where failure happens. And so what they do is they can flag up, and in fact we were just sharing some research today with a client where the assistive technology users are flagging up that in a functional product, this particular interaction can quite often have these fail points. And so even before you've got a coded product, you've got some of the insight of what to avoid to save you going down a path that's not going to be so helpful and then having to come back.
Fantastic. Thank you. Okay, I think I have two very quick questions. First is for Tom. Folks want to know where they can find your comics.
On the Open Inclusion blog is one of them. If you Google my name, you'll find a whole bunch of illustrations as well. So yeah, sadly, I put my website down. I got to bring it back up because it was, it wasn't that accessible. So I said I can't have this website up. So it's in the works. But thank you for your interest.
I wish he'd do more. I love Tom's designs. Thank you, whoever asked that question.
Okay, there's also a quick common question here. Folks are looking for attribution for the stress test quote you referenced.
That's me.
All right.
You can quote me on that one. That's my quote.
You're looking at the author right now.
You
Excellent.
are.
That's a good quote.
Oh, and actually,
Please.
Tom, if you go one slide down, you'll see I have actually attributed, no, down, not up.
Sorry,
up. There you go. You'll see I have actually attributed the quotes that I've provided. And also, just for those people that are interested in learning more, I love learning. We've talked about curiosity and learning. This is not a space you can stand still in. These are just some of the books and guides that I've used actually just in this presentation. So please feel free to go and read the rest of the content around that particular quote that I've pulled out that might be relevant or interesting to you.
Thank you. And just a reminder, if you just tab down past this video stream, you will find a link to this presentation in PDF form where you can see the table that we've got on screen here. Okay, I think we've got time for one more. How do you recommend I advocate for accessibility user testing at my company? We've been doing a lot of accessibility training and design and tech changes over the last 2 years. We do have a third-party and have had a third-party company do usability testing with alt-abled people, but we currently don't have alt-abled testers internally.
Couple of things there to pick up on. One, internal versus external testing. Some organizations have gone down the path of using disabled employees to do testing. That's quite efficient. It's quite easy to do because you have people with capability. A couple of things with that. One, it takes them away from their day job that they're paid to do. So you've got to make sure that they're given the time, the space, a bit like any other employee resource group, roles and responsibilities, that's respected and understood. Secondly, someone who is an employee, say of a bank, and I come from a banking background, can talk banking and understand banking and doesn't really understand low literacy when I'm talking about financial literacy, not language literacy, around banking. And therefore, the way that they'll engage with the product will actually be quite distorted relative to users off the street. So you can use internal resources for that as long as you do it with the buyer beware caution that it is quite restricted in terms of what you'll see relative to normal usability testing with diverse audiences. And how you make the business case, I think, this is actually back to that fueling your design team. You're paying a lot to create products and services, to market them and put them out in the world. And you're paying a lot in terms of efficiency where those products and services might be failing you, whether it's your customer experience team, complaints team, people having to ring call centers because the digital experience isn't working, etc. So there is a huge amount of cost and value in the system already. This is just that fuel to ensure that that cost is working for you and that value is being efficient. So it really does tie into the very mainstream core parts of value in an organization.
Thank you very much, Christine. Great answer. I think we're up against our time here. So thank you both very, very much for your time. For those of you watching, thanks so much for staying with us. And I wish you a wonderful remaining XCon.